Hey everybody, I'm going to do some whiteboard talks. We can't seem to get debates in my house district, District 46. So I decided to come direct to you and just give you my stance on a lot of the issues. Prison is a big deal in this district. Not one candidate is for it, so we don't really differ on that. I will say nobody's offering solutions. I've got some solutions in mind. Um, There's really a lot of solutions available if you look at the people that are um, uh, people who know about it. Anyway, I'm going to get into it here. The most important thing right now is a lot of families are hurting. The economy's not doing great. The government shutdown is affecting a lot of people in District 46 with SNAP benefits being affected. I think it's important for us to talk about how we got here and what we can do in the future to help bolster the economy in our district and in our state. So, first thing I'll talk about is the Arkansas economy. So, when we think about the economy, we're not on an island, so the national economy affects us greatly, but it's pretty much our economy is a mirror of, is a microcosm of the macrocosm of the national economy, in that our economy is made up of different sectors. We have the farming sector, or commodities, as I referred to it, commodity sector, which would be your beef ranchers, poultry producers, and swine, pork, and then you have crop, your row croppers, and row croppers in Arkansas. We haven't had a federal farm bill in many years, and I think that would help a lot. But right now, the as far as the crops go in Arkansas, we grow soybeans, rice, and a little corn, not much corn, but predominantly soybeans and rice. I don't eat many soybeans. You probably don't know many people that eat soybeans. We may have some soy in some Asian dishes or whatever. There may be some fast food chains that have soybeans in their burgers, but predominantly the soybeans we grow were for China to buy. And China's come out and said, we're not buying any of your soybeans. So we have farmers, a large sector of farmers in Arkansas that are growing crops without a buyer. So that is a problem. Uh, Rice, Stuttgart's big rice capital. And the corn, I'm not so sure on the corn where, if they grow any corn, but those are the three major crops in your row croppers. The beef has been in the headlines lately. You may have heard Trump is trying to supplement the beef market with beef from Venezuela. That really upset our beef ranchers, because for the first time in a lot of years, they're they're making money on beef, but it's not sustainable. The beef market is typically on an 11 to 15 year cycle. If you talk to any old time beef rancher, he'll be able to tell you that. You sell when the price of beef is up, and you buy when it's down. But right back to right now, so Trump is supplementing our market with Venezuelan beef, because right now ground beef is $6 to $7 a pound, and uh, that's really not a good combination with a bad economy. When you have consumers that go to the store, ground beef is a staple in the American diet, especially if you don't have a lot of money. You can make quite a few meals with ground beef, and this is kind of pricing them out of beef. So you're seeing a lot of people buy more chicken. They're trying to experiment with ground turkey, things like that. But the back to the topic. So Trump's trying to give the consumer some relief, and he's telling the rancher, "Trust me," when he's trying to supplement with Venezuelan beef. We know that the problem isn't that our beef is just too high. We know that the problem for many, many years in the US has been with the processing. So you have packaging, you have processing, and the largest processor in the US is a company called JBS, and they're a Brazilian company. They're not in the US, but yet they own a lot of beef producing or processing plants. And Trump is tasked his Justice Department with looking into that because he believes that they are pulling some shenanigans to cause the price of beef to go abnormally high. And they also have some poultry processing, not poultry, but swine processing as well. But yeah, Brazilian company, that is part of the problem. And Trump's trying to help out on two fronts there. But we can't do anything about that right now. We have to wait for all that to play out. So what can we do? What would I do if elected to help the people in this economy? And that's what these whiteboard talks are going to do. They're going to let you know what I think we can do in the Arkansas legislature to help the people of Arkansas. First things first, I could go really large on this and talk about the whole history of the economies and why we are where we are, but I need to try to cut this a little bit short because I don't want to lose you. In short, the economy in the US has grown starting in the 90s, the mid 90s. You can probably remember, if you've been around long enough, we had a surplus in the US. So rising tide raises all ships. Arkansas's economy started going up. And so the 90s to I would say the mid 2000s, our economy was steadily going up. Then in 2008, we had a crash, which was precipitated by a housing bubble. So the housing bubble crashed the economy. We had all kind of bailouts, quantitative easing. There's a lot of theory there. I can talk about that later. But we have never fully recovered since 2008. I'll argue with any economist. We can see that when Trump's first term, we were on an upward trajectory, and he was doing great. It was a large economy, and then COVID. I hope that doesn't get me saying that word. Well, I'll just say the sickness happened mysteriously, and that collapsed that. And during COVID, we had where's my eraser? The largest transfer of wealth in the history of this country. So in the 90s, I'm going to go back a little bit here. You had, if you may remember, Ross Perot was a presidential candidate. And he said that if the free trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, and GATT were to go through, that initially it would be great, which it was in the 90s. Clinton was elected, all the free trade agreements, and you could just package all this to say globalism. So you have globalist policies were passed, which made all of our manufacturing go overseas. They were incentivized to move all of their manufacturing to other countries to where the labor markets were much cheaper. For most of our nation's existence, we operated with tariffs. And every other nation did as well. There are 2 F's in tariffs, I think, and that's just how it was. But they had this idea of a global economy, which a global economy is not really feasible if you have sovereign nation states. You can have free trade on some things, but for industry to stay in your country, it will never work. We can talk about some of the ideology of the globalists that wanted to have a global economy. Essentially, in a nutshell, is they didn't want to raise the first world to, or the third world to the first world state. They wanted to lower the first world. They wanted everybody to be lowered to the same level. They didn't want to raise anybody up. They just wanted to bring everybody down. And that's what a globalist economic policy does. And you can read their white papers and their books, and it will tell you that. That's not me saying that, that's them. So anyway, for most of our nation's history, we operated on tariffs. And that's what we've got to get back to get manufacturing back to our country. That's the only way without making everybody a pauper, to where your economy collapse and you can work for 15 cents an hour. Anyway, we don't want to go down that road. So Trump's doing what he can do to get rid of globalism, globalist economic policy. So what can we do? Here's what my idea. We have of late been cutting taxes. It's a trend in policy across all the states and Arkansas, but we're not doing it fast enough, and it shows. It shows in the economic sector. I'm in business, and retail is down. It's been down. So what can we do to put money back in the pockets of Arkansans? Well, to start off, when I was talking about economies growing in the 90s and 2000s, when the economy grows, so does the government. Because what does government do? It loves money, it's attracted to it, and it grows in the presence of it. So, but the last thing to happen is for the government to contract with the economy. So we have to make that happen if we're going to have any headway here. So we're going to have to shrink the size of our state government as well as our federal government. You've seen that happening, and there's birth pangs that go along with that, because you have people that are on social programs that were established during great times. And when you have great times and you have surpluses in tax revenues, then you can afford those programs. But right now we can't. We are somewhere around $14-15 trillion in debt, and we're going to have to learn to cut the size of our government to put more money back in the pockets of the consumer. And I think everybody will agree that I know how to spend my money better than the government knows how to spend my money. So first thing, individual income taxes. Income tax. I think right now the median income is somewhere around $35,000 a year in Arkansas. So $35K a year. And the individual income tax rate on that is, I think it's 2.9%. No, 3.9. So 3.9%. And that comes out to be, what's my math on that? 3.9% of $35,000. I think that, what's that, like $1,200? Yeah. So it's $1,365 per year. That's 113, we'll say $114 a month. $114 a month. That's could go toward a car payment. That could go toward a business that you want to create. You go to groceries, whatever. I know how to spend it better than the government does. My money, that is. Another thing, so we have individual income tax that we need to abolish. I'm talking about state taxes. Federal, we can talk more about that later, but we only can do what we can do. So a next thing is in the 1990s, when the economy was booming, 1991 it was, Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, they enacted a sales tax on used vehicles. You know why they didn't do it in the 80s? Because it wouldn't have worked. You know why they didn't do it in the 70s? Because it wouldn't have worked. Any lawmaker who knew in the 80s or the 70s, if they would have passed a bill to do that, they would have been thrown out on their tail and they wouldn't have been reelected. Why were they allowed to do it in the 90s? Because people had money in their pockets and they didn't feel it as much. We need, like I said, we need to shrink the size of our state government. We have to cut this out, do away with it, go back to the policies that we had before, put that money back in the hands of the consumer, of the Arkansan, of the small business owner, the teacher, the farmer. So what is the average used vehicle price? I would say somewhere around $20,000. They've tried to finagle the sales tax. When it first passed in 91, it was $2,000. If you bought a used vehicle and it was under $2,000, you didn't have to pay the used sales tax. Since then, it is, and it was 3.5%. Now they've moved the rate, the aggregate amount up. If it's 10,000, if it's below 10,000, then you don't have to pay. But if it is from $10,001 to $15,000, it is 6.5%. On this $20,000 vehicle, you're going to pay 6.5%, which is around $1,300, right? So I think my math's right on that. So $21,300 you're going to be given to the government. And keep in mind, this vehicle has already had sales tax paid on it once, at least once. Maybe it's not a one-owner vehicle. Maybe they've sold it 3 or 4 times, and they're still getting this 6.5% every single time. We can't put up with that anymore. We've got to do away with it. We need people to have that $1,300 in their pocket. I mean, $1,300, how much is that per month? $100 a month, $100 and something dollars a month? You could take that, put 25 with it. You know, you have an LLC. You buy a pickup for, a F-150, you want to be a carpenter, you start a small business. We have to put money in the pockets of Arkansans. Government can't do anything with it to help the economy. We have to put it back in the pockets of people who can. So individual income tax has to go. Used sales tax on vehicles has to go. Here's my last point. I definitely won't stop there, but my last point for tonight is something that it can be controversial, but it's personal property taxes. This is a very nuanced conversation. I realize that our school systems, they're already being attacked from all angles with the LEARNS Act. I get it. Help is on the way. If I'm elected, you can count on me to make sure that our small schools like County Line, Magazine, Scranton, all these schools that we've relied on for so many years that gave us County Line School. The late Senator Gary Stubblefield is a County Line School alumni. I know a lot of people. I have 2 boys that graduated from County Line. I don't want to see these small schools go away. Anyway, don't get me off into LEARNS. I realize that the school districts rely heavily on these personal property taxes. We're not going to be able to do this all at once, but we've got to start somewhere. I say we start with our seniors. I say that if you're 65 or older, you should never have to worry about losing a home you spent your entire life paying for. So I say we start with those 65 and older, and our disabled and veterans should never have to worry about losing the home that they paid for. You shouldn't have to pay rent to your government. We need to do away with it. Our country was founded on the principle of owning property. In fact, at the onset of our country, if you weren't a landowner, you couldn't vote. That's how important land ownership and property ownership is in this country. We don't rent it from the government. We own our property. So we have to do away with it. We're going to start with our seniors, our disabled folks, and veterans. If you're a veteran or if you're over 65, I know I worked for a while. One of the things I did was I was a HUD housing manager. So I know firsthand the folks that are in this category. If you're disabled or 65 and older, what you have to deal with every month. If you own personal property, you don't need to go without food because you want to leave your property to your children. You don't want to go without medicine because you hope that your children can have this property someday. So with these three things here, you can see how they add up. The personal income tax, over $100 a month. Used vehicle, over $100 a month. Personal property taxes, that's going to be well over $100 a month in many places. And this adds up. That's the way taxes do. Taxation is theft, and we are all it's the death of a thousand cuts. Your tax here, tax there. You'll see many times shared on social media where all the list of taxes that we have to pay. I understand use taxes. We need I'm not an anarchist. We need to have a government. We need to have social order. But in this country, we know that growing our economy, getting things back the way that it should be, you have to put money back in the hands of the people who fuel the economy, and that's the consumer, so we can start growing our economy again. When I was talking about the sectors, different sectors of our economy, I didn't quite get to finish that, and I'll go back to that real quick before I let you go. Okay, so we have the commodities side over here with farming and ranching and stuff like that. Then we have industrial, and that is what we have lost. We've lost our industrial base. Our middle class is in the industrial base. And you also have the service economy. That includes retail stores. Your retail, your hospitality, tourism, your trades. And these are all affected by this. Your trades rely on your industry. If you're an electrician, all the supplies you need to wire a home, the wiring, the conduit, the breaker panels, the breakers, all that comes from the industrial sector. The same thing with our commodity side. A lot of our chemicals that we use, a lot of our fencing, barbed wire, machinery, all comes from this is the base of your economy. And until we figure out a way to get this back, excuse me, we have most of our people are in this segment now. I know Arkansas, we do have a lot of ag jobs. We're fortunate enough to live in God's country where you can grow about anything. And I thank God for that. But we do have a lot of people in this side of the economy. So until we get industry back, then we are going to have to rely on what we have, and that is our retail, our tourism, and our trades, and our agriculture. So first things first, we have to shrink the size of our government to the relationship of our economy. It can't be mismatched. You can't have a larger government than you do the economy. It just doesn't work. You can't reinvent math. So I'm saying let's start by cutting taxes, cut the ones that we installed when it was great. We just revert some of those. If let me put it like this: if you got a new job and let's say you worked let's say the industry came in, you got a new job and you were helping assemble a widget, and now you're making 60 grand a year. Okay, that's great. You're going to get a nicer home. You're going to get a nicer car. You're going to be able to buy, maybe pay somebody to cut your grass. You don't got to do it yourself anymore. But that industry leaves. Now you're making 35K a year. What's going to happen if you keep spending like you have 60? Well, you don't have to have much of an imagination to tell. It just doesn't math out. We have to put money back in the hands of Arkansans. People are hurting right now. I know it. I see it. And I really appreciate our churches and our nonprofits that are helping out, the food banks. If you have extra, give to a food bank. So long in this country, our government has stepped on the toes of the church. In times past, we've always relied on the church for charity and to help out folks that are in need. And they've always been there, and they're still there. And you see now, when the government can't help you, the church has stepped up. And I just want to say kudos to all the church leaders and the people in the churches. Thanks for helping out. And this is the end of the first whiteboard talk. I hope you. One last thing. I will draft the bills that I intend to introduce if elected. I'll draft those bills, and I will have them to where you can read them here in the future. That way you can pick it apart. And that's my plan is, one thing I've noticed on the campaign trail, most of the folks I'll speak to, they say, are you going to be reachable and are you going to keep us informed? I will, and I'm going to start now. I'll draft the bills that I plan to introduce. You can read them. If you have a problem with them, reach out to me. I don't know everything. I'm doing what I know to be the best thing to do. But anyway, I will get those bills, and they're each going to be on their own bill. I think one issue per bill is the way to go. That's an issue we're having now at the national level. And I'll get those uploaded for you here in the future. Have a great evening. God bless you, and God bless Arkansas.